The afternoon sun spread across Meadow Creek's schoolyard like a golden ribbon at day's end, gently draping over the tiny heads peeking out from behind the iron gate. The sounds of school dismissal rose in a familiar rhythm. Slapping footsteps on the sidewalk, bursts of laughter from children excited to go home, and, somewhere, the slow rumble of car engines in the student pickup zone. On the steps in front of the red brick building, a petite girl sat with her knees tucked under her chin, two light blue ribboned braids swaying gently in the breeze. That was Lucy Carter, 7 years old, a fan of light-up sneakers, and impressively good at identifying car models just by sound. Every Friday afternoon, she waited a little longer for her mom, because traffic on the I-25 freeway was what her mother jokingly called a weekend tradition. But Lucy didn't mind. She usually spent that time counting red cars or watching a very special friend resting at the bottom of the steps. Blitz, a retired K9 unit dog, a German shepherd with dark, glossy fur and eyes like bottomless wells. Blitz no longer followed commands, leaped into helicopters, or rolled through obstacle courses, but he still wore a collar engraved with his name, a trace of his service years. He didn't lie down like other dogs. Blitz rested with the poise of a soldier trained to wait for the unusual. How he held his head up, silent but always tuning his ears to distant sounds, made you feel he wasn't merely resting. He was listening to the world. Next to Blitz sat Officer Deanna Rodriguez, his former partner, now running the Pause and Peace therapy program at the school. She sat on a bench, finishing an electronic report, occasionally glancing at Blitz out of habit more than needed. They had spent years together in the force, and though no longer on the front lines, their bond hadn't faded. That afternoon unfolded like any other. Kids chattering, parents honking, Blitz standing guard like a breathing statue, until a man stepped onto the sidewalk from across the street. He looked to be in his 60s, wearing a charcoal wool coat, salt and pepper hair, thin-rimmed glasses, and an oddly calm demeanor. He didn't look like someone anxiously searching for his child in a crowd. He walked like he knew exactly where he was headed. And when his eyes met Lucy's, a faint smile spread across his face. Not too distant, not overly familiar, just enough to confuse a child. "Lucy," he called in a soft voice. "Sweetie, come to Grandpa." Lucy looked up, squinting. She didn't move. The man took a few more steps. "It's Grandpa. Don't you remember me?" That was when Blitz, who had been lying quietly behind her, opened his eyes. Not because of the sound, not because of the words. Blitz didn't react to language. He reacted to feeling. A wave pulsed through his body like a cold breeze beneath the skin. He raised his head, eyes locked on the man, body suddenly tense. Then he stood, slowly but decisively, as if a silent command had just rung out in the air, audible only to him. A low growl rumbled from Blitz's throat. Not loud, not rushed, but deep and certain like thunder buried in the earth. The sound made Deanna turn her head, her brow furrowing instantly. Blitz rarely growled, and if he did, something had crossed a line. "Blitz, easy," Deanna said reflexively, her hand brushing the dog's collar like she was trying to hold back a rising instinct. But Blitz didn't look away from the man. He leaned forward, growling louder now, clearer, more pointed. Lucy still stood there, frozen. She blinked several times like she was trying to sort out a dream that didn't feel right. "Grandpa?" she said quietly. "Why don't you smell like cinnamon?" The man paused, and Blitz, needing no further evidence, was ready. The man leaned slightly forward, his face wearing the kind of kindly smile that seemed harmless. His voice softened, engineered to persuade a child. "Lucy, sweetheart, come here to Grandpa. Your mom's busy at the clinic. She asked me to pick you up. Don't you remember me?" The words were sweetened like candy, but something in their rhythm felt off, something an adult might overlook, but a child's intuition picks up clearly. Lucy stood frozen. She stared at the man, confused, searching her memory, trying to pull up a forgotten face. Then she slowly shook her head, "You're not my grandpa," she whispered. The man smiled again, this time more forced, trying to wave away the denial with a flurry of fabricated details. "Don't you remember? I gave you a purple bike. Your mom said—" "You're not my grandpa," Lucy said louder this time, clearer. Her voice trembled but stood firm. "My grandpa smells like cinnamon and soap," she whispered. "You smell like old wood and metal." At that moment, Blitz growled again. Just once, deep and thick, resonating from his chest, not to scare but to alert. Blitz wasn't the type to startle. He sensed danger from the subtlest shifts in the air, the uneven heartbeat of a liar, the adrenaline scent of someone hiding intent. He growled but didn't blink, eyes fixed on the man. His body, trained to charge into smoke and chase armed suspects, was now coiled, ready to launch. Every muscle in him hummed like a live wire under fur. Deanna looked up from her phone the instant she heard the growl. She reached for Blitz's leash, trying to steady him, though she knew something serious was happening. She had worked with Blitz for nearly a decade, and he'd never reacted this way to someone who was smiling. "Blitz, easy," she said gently, grounding her voice like a hand on his back. But Blitz didn't turn. The man stepped closer, hand outstretched in a slow, rehearsed motion, eyes wide as if shocked by the attention they were now attracting. "She's just confused. I have documents." Blitz launched off the ground like a silent wave had triggered him. The leash snapped taut, jerking Deanna slightly, but her grip held. Blitz didn't bite, didn't pounce. He barked. Once. Sharp, decisive, like a battlefield command. "Sir, step back!" Deanna shouted. The man flinched, stepping back, fear flashing for the first time. But his eyes were still locked on Lucy. The girl now stood pressed against the wall, gripping her backpack straps so tightly her knuckles turned white. Whispered voices swirled across the schoolyard, a few parents stepping closer, suspicion etched on their faces. A teacher came running from inside, wrapping an arm around Lucy and shielding her. "That's not her family," she said quietly to Deanna. "I've never seen him before." Deanna didn't need another word. Her hand had already reached for the radio to call for backup. But it was Blitz who remained at the center. He was still barking, solid, eyes unblinking, target locked. He was holding the line, holding back whatever terrible thing might happen with just one more step. The man fumbled for his wallet, pulling out an ID and a folded document. "I have paperwork. I'm Joseph Carter. She's a Carter. I am her grandfather." Deanna didn't reach for them. Her eyes drifted down to Blitz. The dog didn't back away. He barked again. Sharper this time, louder, laced with warning. And in the fading afternoon light, where the schoolyard fell silent save for those piercing barks, a chilling investigation had already begun. Blitz, no longer a badge-carrying officer, still carried the instincts of justice, and today the heart of an old warrior had spoken up, at the right time, in the right place. Blitz kept growling, each sound deep and resonant like a gong struck from the depths of instinct. The way he held his posture, tense but controlled, didn't resemble a dog reacting to fear. It was the stance of a seasoned soldier blocking the threshold of danger. His eyes, brown flecked with gray, never left the man in front of him, as if he had seen him somewhere before, in the shadows, in memories that human language could never name. Deanna could feel the leash taut in her hand, not because Blitz was pulling, but because every part of him was charged, like static on the verge of ignition. He needed no orders. He didn't need the timing to be right. Blitz didn't act on command. He acted on something deeper, something unteachable and impossible to fake. "Sir," Deanna said, stepping between Lucy and the man, "I need you to stay back." "I'm just here to pick up my granddaughter. Here's my driver's license," the man replied, his voice slightly shaky but still smooth enough to mask his unease. He pulled out an ID and a thin stack of papers from his coat pocket, then quickly added a document labeled Student Pickup Authorization. Blitz barked. Not loudly, but the sound echoed like the air had hollowed out around them. Lucy recoiled, panic in her eyes, her voice trembling. "My grandpa never comes to school without calling first. Mom always texts the teacher." A nearby teacher nodded immediately. "That's right. Emma, Lucy's mom, always lets us know in advance if someone else is coming. And I've never seen this man before." The man slowly lowered his hand, his smile slipping. "Maybe she forgot. I'm Joseph Carter. We live in Littleton. I have every right to pick her up." Deanna didn't touch the documents. She stepped closer, close enough to hear the quickened breaths he was trying to hide. "If that's true, you won't mind if we check your bag, will you?" "My bag?" His voice caught. Blitz barked again, louder this time, drawing startled gasps from a nearby group of parents. A woman pulled her son close, suspicion lighting up her eyes. "Under these circumstances," Deanna said, eyes never leaving the man, "we're required to ensure student safety. A bag search is necessary. This is a violation of my rights? Then you can refuse. But we'll wait for a search warrant. And until then, you're not allowed to leave school property." The man hesitated. Then, as if out of options, he placed his brown leather bag on the dew-slick pavement and unzipped it. Deanna pulled on gloves and crouched, carefully opening it. Blitz stepped closer, nose low, ears sharp. The first item, a small bottle of pills, labeled with the name of a powerful sedative, prescription only. Below that, a bundle of white plastic zip ties, unused, and at the very bottom, a faded pink baseball cap, embroidered along the brim in purple thread. Lily. Time froze. Deanna didn't speak. She stood up slowly, one hand still gloved, the other gently tightening the leash, as if to keep her heart from cracking open at the sight of that name. Lucy gasped, her breath jagged. "Lily, that's not me. I don't have a cap like that." Blitz stepped forward. No more growling now, only a single bark, low and steady, like a church bell tolling for a truth just exposed. The sound was so resonant that the windows around the schoolyard seemed to shiver with it. Officer Daniels had just returned from the patrol car. His eyes swept over the items, then locked on the pale-faced man. He didn't ask anything. "Turn around," Daniels said, his voice cold and metallic. "Hands behind your back." "No, you don't understand. I didn't do anything. I just came for my granddaughter." Daniels snapped the cuffs on him without a blink. "Lily Jane Foster, 6 years old. Missing 6 weeks ago in Denver. She had a cap just like this." Blitz didn't need to bark again. Lucy dropped to the steps, face buried in her small hands. Blitz came to her, slowly, gently. He didn't lunge. He didn't howl. He simply pressed his body against her, sitting close like a silent guardian, no longer fierce, no longer growling, just a warm, present. Lucy looked up. "You knew from the start, didn't you?" Blitz looked at her, his eyes dark and deep. He couldn't speak, but his silence held more than words. Deanna came over, placing a soft hand on Lucy's shoulder. "You're safe now, thanks to Blitz." And in what had seemed like a normal afternoon, a dog's instinct, untaught, undimmed, had stopped a tragedy before it could unfold. The patrol car turned the corner, taking with it the man who had claimed to be Lucy's grandfather, and the leather bag that was no longer innocent. The items inside, the prescription sedative, the bundle of zip ties, the pink cap with Lily stitched in purple, were more than evidence of a plan. They were fragments of a nightmare, proof of how darkness can cloak itself in the familiar. And in the middle of the growing murmurs, Blitz stood still, eyes fixed on the space where the car had vanished. Deanna didn't have to kneel to know that Blitz wasn't just looking. He was remembering, not just with his eyes, but with that part of the soul they had both buried away. A time that passed, but never really closed. The way the old shepherd stood there, shoulders tight, head tilted, tail unmoving, wasn't the posture of a dog proud of doing his duty. It was the stance of someone who had once failed, and just now had a final chance to make it right. Deanna tightened the leash, not to restrain Blitz, but to steady herself. Her hand brushed the graying fur at his neck. The spot once familiar with harness clips, the anchor she held every time they rushed into chaos. And now, the resting place of quiet, unnamed memories. She recognized the look in Blitz's eyes. It wasn't pride. It was a soldier remembering the battle he couldn't win. Back then, in a small northern town, on an afternoon much like this, a girl named Ava Moore, 8 years old, brown hair tied with a red ribbon, a heart-patterned scarf on her backpack, vanished while playing near the backyard fence. No sound, no cry, no clues, except for tire marks across the damp grass and a crumpled scarf left in the muddy soil. Blitz, still young and burning with purpose, led the search through sun-dappled woods for 2 days. He barked 3 times. The last was at the lake's edge, where the footprints stopped as if the world had gone silent with one slip beyond sight. Ava was never found. And on that rainy afternoon, in a clearing soaked with cold regret, Deanna had sat beside Blitz, clinging to his neck like she was holding on to something just lost, something they couldn't name. Blitz never barked again that day. He just stood, like a statue guarding a sorrow that must not be forgotten. Afterward he grew quieter, barked less, and didn't chase every strange sound. Not from fatigue, but from understanding. That some barks must be saved for what truly deserves to break the silence. And today, at Meadow Creek, after years of stillness, Blitz barked again. 3 times. At the right time. Loud enough, not out of suspicion but because he recognized something others hadn't yet seen. Lucy sat huddled on the steps, tears still streaking her cheeks. But now her hand gently stroked Blitz's back, those small fingers writing a thank you deeper than any spoken word. "You're not my grandpa," she'd said, and Blitz confirmed it with a language beyond words. He didn't look at the liar's face. He smelled the metal in his breath. He sensed the tension hiding in every movement. And when he barked, it wasn't a threat. It was a shield, forged from the pain of once being too late. Deanna stood behind them, watching the small silhouette of a trembling child and the quiet form of an old dog standing guard. And inside her, the ache of that long-ago failure softened, transformed. Not into forgiveness, because there was nothing to forgive, but into recognition that this time they were in time. They hadn't just saved a child. They had salvaged a part of their own story long frozen in regret. Blitz bowed his head, nudging Lucy's hand. No sound came. But she smiled for the first time that afternoon. A gentle smile, like the last ray of sun sliding through rustling autumn leaves. And in that smile, both Deanna and Blitz knew. This time, they hadn't been too late. As the afternoon tilted westward, casting thin streaks of sunlight like spilled wine over the breeze-damp concrete, a silver car came screeching around the far end of the road, flanking the school. The rear tires skidded so sharply it sliced through the frozen hush that had settled over the campus. The car door flung open, and in that instant, Emma Carter hurled herself out, as if time had rewound and deposited her back at the last place she ever belonged to, where her daughter was still waiting, still safe, not yet consumed by the shadow of something people don't dare name too early. She didn't speak. Her body moved on the rawest kind of instinct. Not the maternal kind alone, but the primal awareness of a creature that senses the line between having and losing. Her steps were heavy but rushed, her hands clenched so tightly they blanched, and her eyes blazed with panic that had been caged too long. All of it converged toward a single point, those stone steps, where Lucy sat curled beneath a teacher's blanket, and Blitz stood beside her like a living shield, guarding the last sliver of light in the world's heart. Emma collapsed, not with the grace of emotion, but with the jagged crash of a body dropped from the height of fear. Her knees hit the ground, hands trembling as they reached for her child, like a sleepwalker clawing through a nightmare with no clear end. "Lucy!" Her voice cracked. Not a name, just a sound, torn from deeper than her throat. where the heart began to tremble at realizing what it almost lost. Lucy heard it. She looked up, and in that very moment, as if an invisible cord had pulled taut between two souls who had just survived the unthinkable, the girl bolted from the blanket and shot into her mother's arms like an arrow returning home. Emma wrapped her daughter tightly. For a few seconds, she said nothing, as though she needed to measure every breath, every heartbeat, every familiar strand of hair on Lucy's head to confirm this wasn't an illusion. Then she began to cry, not wailing, not shattering, but in broken breaths, falling into her daughter's collar like drops of rain softening the stone that had frozen inside her during the drive here. "Are you okay? Did he touch you? Did they do anything?" she asked, the question spilling out in sharp shards of panic that couldn't be held back. Lucy shook her head, burying her face into her mother's chest, then looked up and pointed at Blitz. "He didn't let the man touch me," her voice hoarse, but steady, like a belief that had rooted before fear could grow. Emma turned, and for the first time her eyes met Blitz, the dog with a calm stance, a steady gaze, showing no pride, demanding no spotlight, simply standing, like a hill quietly holding on to the shape of the sky after the storm has passed. She said nothing. She only lowered her head, lower than to her knees before Blitz. No one asked her to, no ritual demanded it. But when gratitude grows beyond words, people turn to action. And Emma, with the hands that once rocked Lucy as a newborn, now placed them on Blitz's chest, where breath still rose, where the heart of an old warrior kept time for memories that once came too late, and whispered only for him to hear, "Thank you for not letting me lose her." Blitz didn't move, but his eyes closed slowly. Once, not as a reply, but as the quiet period after a promise fulfilled. "This is what I was born to do." Deanna stood nearby, silent. She didn't interrupt. She let her gaze rest on the scene. A mother kneeling before a dog, a child clinging to her mother's neck, and Blitz in the middle, an unspoken bridge between a nearly lived nightmare and the miracle just reclaimed. Teachers and parents stood watching, many with tears slipping down their cheeks. But no one stepped forward. Everyone knew that some moments are sacred, not to be crowded by awkward etiquette. Some moments belong only to the heart, and today, Blitz had become the heart of them all. Lucy tugged at her mother's sleeve, pointing to the ink-stained spot on her white coat. "Mom, can we take him home?" Emma didn't answer right away. She looked at Blitz, then at her daughter. Then she smiled, for the first time in what felt like a lifetime. She didn't need to say anything. Blitz had already come home long before she realized it. He was in Lucy's eyes, in the safety of their embrace. At that very moment, she was allowed to cry because her daughter was still alive. And beneath the softening afternoon light, as the shadows of mother, daughter, and dog stretched across the schoolyard, none of them spoke. Because true heroes don't always speak. They simply stand and stay until the storm has passed. Evening fell completely. The last light at Meadow Creek School clung to the trees in thin silver strands, shimmering across the pavement like molten metal cooling into silence. After the breathless reunion of Lucy and Emma, it felt like everything had finally settled into peace. But Blitz hadn't moved. He still stood near the brown leather bag the man had left behind, not barking, not growling, but his eyes locked on it as if something inside had yet to reveal its truth. Deanna, now having removed her gloves and tucked them into her coat, approached Blitz, leaning slightly to read his reaction. She'd known him long enough to understand. When Blitz stared at an object like this, it wasn't a bag, it was the next chapter in a story only he could read. And then, as if confirming her thought, Blitz barked. Once. Deep and sharp, like a blade drawn clean from its sheath. This time, not to warn, but to direct. A callback to something crucial that everyone else had almost overlooked. Deanna stopped cold. She knelt, eyes on the bag, hand reaching with the precision of someone touching something fragile. not out of fear, but out of respect for the instinct that had just spoken. Inside, beyond the items already catalogued, the sedative, the zip ties, the cap-embroidered lily, was a side compartment. When she unzipped it, a soft rustle echoed. Leather brushing slick paper. Deanna pulled out another ID. Her flashlight beam lit up the surface. The same man, gray hair, wire-frame glasses, but the name wasn't Joseph L. Carter. It read, Thomas Edward Langston. She handed the card to Officer Daniels, still on the radio with headquarters. He immediately ran it through the federal system. Less than a minute later, the handheld radio crackled. No individual named Joseph Carter matches that ID anywhere in state, but the real name, Thomas Edward Langston, is flagged in the federal database, linked to at least 3 missing child cases across 4 states. Files were inactive due to lack of evidence. Until now. Deanna's hand curled into a fist. Her eyes never left Blitz. The dog still standing near the bag, head slightly bowed, ears perked forward as if waiting for a truth deeper than data to emerge. Blitz, she whispered, like saying his name was a ritual to confirm the trust that had just been reinforced. And looking into his eyes, still fixed on the bag, she understood. This wasn't the end. Daniels, now with a search order in hand, knelt beside her. "Give me another glove," he said, voice calm but urgent. Blitz shifted slightly, making space but not retreating. His gaze tracked every movement like a seasoned guide overseeing his first class. Where others saw the evidence, Blitz saw connections waiting to be uncovered. At the bottom of the main compartment, where the leather lining bulged oddly, Deanna's fingers touched something cold and hard. She slit the fine stitching with a small knife. A hidden pocket opened. Inside, a silver USB drive. No markings, no logo. To any investigator, it was clear. The real answers weren't in the wallet. They were in here. Blitz barked again. Not a warning, not a confirmation. A full stop. The final sound ends the predator's long charade. Deanna turned toward Lucy, still seated on the bench, clinging to her mother's coat. That little girl had been saved, not by fences, not by protocol, but by the quiet persistence of a dog who had once failed, and now made it right. She looked back at Blitz. He stood still, as always, not barking, not basking, but in his eyes there was something new, an old wound sewn shut with the thread of being on time. And behind that last bark lay the map to something bigger, darker. But this time, they had their first light. And that light's name was Blitz. Under the pale yellow light in the temporary office of the Carter County Rapid Response Team, the USB was plugged into a dedicated computer. Files appeared one after another, not dull spreadsheets or dry plans, but a series of carefully named images, organized by region codes, dates, and children's names. Each folder was like a knife plunged deep into reality. When the folder labeled Bayfront Option 1 opened, everyone in the room fell silent. In a blurry, distant photo, a little girl about 6 years old, with softly curled red hair, wearing a butterfly-patterned sweater, carrying a purple backpack embroidered with the name Maya in white thread, stood by a playground fence. Her face was turned slightly away, but her smile was hauntingly clear, as if the photographer had stood close enough to catch her breath, but chose to hide in the shadows. Another photo showed a ladybug-shaped lunchbox on the grass, beside a pair of small canvas shoes dusted with dirt on their soles. Blitz lay by Deanna's feet, head resting on his front paws, eyes half open in wait, like a gate just cracked open, waiting for the wind to push it wide. When Maya's image appeared on the screen, he shifted slightly. Not an unconscious movement, but a subtle reaction, like he had already known what was coming before humans had connected the dots. Deanna placed a hand on Blitz's back, a touch to keep herself from sinking. Years of working together had taught her that if Blitz wasn't completely still, something was simmering inside. Not anger, but intuition gathering power, waiting to be led. That very night, the FBI was officially called in. Special Agent Helen Shaw, who had led 3 federal cases on missing children, was assigned to command the investigation, bringing with her a team of data analysts, forensic examiners, and something unexpected: a special invitation for Deanna and Blitz. "We want you both on the temporary task force," Shaw said decisively, catching the deep gaze of the dog sitting close beside Deanna, like an inseparable shadow. "We've reviewed the files. Not many can make a retired K9 bark 3 times for the same reason." Deanna was startled at first. She was no longer a field officer. Blitz had passed 12, the age when working dogs typically retire completely. But before she was Maya's photo, a child she'd never met, never heard from, and at her feet was Blitz, the dog who never forgot a sound unheard, a scent lost. She nodded. "If Blitz can still move, I won't just sit still." Helen Shaw smiled thinly. "We don't need him to run. We need him to be exactly where the hunt begins." The next morning, the FBI team opened the second suitcase seized from a warehouse on the city outskirts, registered under one of 5 aliases Langston had used. Inside the silver suitcase, amid carefully disguised documents, was Maya's photo, the same one from the USB, this time accompanied by a roughly hand-drawn map of Bayfront Elementary, Maya's home address, and her school dismissal schedule for the week. Blitz stood a few steps away. But as Maya's photo was taken out, he approached, not just to sniff, but as if confirming what was in the picture was real, not just a file. He lowered his head, nose almost touching the photo's corner, then barked, a short, deep sound, not fierce but firm, like the nod of an old man who has seen what younger people cannot imagine. Helen Shaw looked at Deanna. "We could lose another child, or we could stop it from happening again. But this time, we don't just have data. We have a dog who knows when the world is lying." Deanna's hand stroked Blitz's neck gently, tracing a path, not on his fur, but on the soul of one who had guarded the line between light and darkness for too long. "Let's go," she whispered. "We're starting again. For another child, and for a bark that was never meaningless." That day, an unmarked SUV left the Carter County Police Station heading south to Bayfront, where Maya still went to school and still believed the world held no true terror. And in the back seat, Blitz lay quietly, head resting on Deanna's lap, eyes open, alert. No one told him this was a mission, but he chose it, and in his steady breath beat the pulse of those who had never been found. When the FBI SUV turned into Bayfront, the quiet seaside town where even the crashing waves sounded like a sleepy city's breath, Blitz didn't close his eyes. For nearly 90 minutes from Carter County, he lay still in the back, head on Deanna's lap, never relaxing. Their ears pricked high, and every break, every jolt over potholes made a slight twitch ripple through his aging, graying fur. He didn't watch the window. The dim dawn light mixed with mist held no charm for a soul that had seen too many dark turns. Blitz was guarding, not the road ahead, but what he sensed waiting behind the calm surface, something hidden beneath the illusion of peace. At the temporary FBI headquarters on Bayfront's City Hall second floor, a team of agents and analysts had camped overnight, decoding the contents of a burner phone found in the second suitcase, a silent piece of evidence holding more secrets than any confession. The phone had no contacts, no personal photos, and only 5 encrypted messages. Text only, sender names stripped, sent from IP addresses routed through VPNs spanning multiple countries. When the decoding software revealed the contents, the room fell into heavy silence. Option 1 confirmed. Backpack matches. Proceed. Window of opportunity, Thursday. Low risk. Same method. No deviation. Do not engage Carter Girl again. Too noisy. Helen Shaw read the final message aloud, her voice low but weighted, each word striking the glass wall like a hammer. Too noisy. That phrase echoed in the meeting room like a scratch across memory. Everyone knew who the Carter girl was, and everyone understood that too noisy didn't mean yelling. It meant the reaction of a child who refused to be silent. A girl who dared step back instead of forward, who said, "That's not my grandfather," before adults could even ask questions. And more importantly, Blitz had barked. Deanna sat at the far end of the table, her hand resting lightly on Blitz's neck. He lay by her feet like a shadow formed of vigilance. She didn't need to look at the screen. Hearing "too noisy" was enough. Langston was not acting alone. There was someone else. A network, a handler, a plan B, and clearly, a next target. Blitz twitched. His nose quivered as if catching a scent no one else could. He didn't bark or growl, but the slight tilt of his ears told Deanna that unease was spreading. "Not just one," she whispered, as if confessing to herself, but also hearing Blitz's thoughts. Helen Shaw nodded. "They never work alone. A man like Langston needs help. He can't roam 4 states, surveil dozens of schools, gather intel, encode data, alone. Someone's out there in the shadows. Someone who knows when to be silent and when to step back." Her last words reminded Deanna of the man that day, who tried to play calm even when Blitz blocked him. Blitz didn't just smell sedatives or zip ties. He smelled something humans cannot name in words. Deception woven into behavior, a fractured past no fake document could patch. And now the truth wasn't in Langston's mouth, but in anonymous messages, where a network had deemed Lucy too noisy, because she refused to be quiet like the others. Deanna looked down at Blitz. "You know," she whispered, "they didn't pick Lucy because she was weak. They picked her because they thought she'd be silent like the rest." Blitz blinked once. Not much, but in those eyes that had witnessed too much loss, something brightened, like hearing a no from a child everyone thought would nod. That day, the investigation officially opened the Pavilion Network file, a system pulled from a coded file in the USB. A network that rated children with scorecards, photos, schedules, and labels like low risk, trial option, and quiet. Maya was marked Option 1. Lucy? Noted as too noisy, abort. Blitz lifted his head, and for the first time in the meeting, left his spot and approached the information board along the wall. No one stopped him. No one spoke, because when he pressed his nose against the small map circled in red, Bayfront's area, everyone knew there were things this dog sensed before the data appeared. He turned back, sat beside Deanna, and looked straight at Helen Shaw. No sound, no gesture, but Helen bent down, held Blitz's gaze a long moment, and quietly said what she'd never put into words before. "We won't let another child end up on that list." And so Blitz, a K-9 once thought retired, became the centerpiece of a federal investigation. Not for his past achievements, but because his instinct was something no machine could replace, a growl from primal instinct for the souls still unspoken for. As the printer in the command room whirred continuously, pages extracted from the USB sliding one by one out of the tray, carrying code names, routing codes, and blurred photos of children still missing. Down the carpeted hallway outside the FBI office, a small but determined step approached. No one noticed at first. In the dense atmosphere of data and tense stares, attention focused mostly on diagrams, maps, and traces. But Blitz was different. He lay quietly at Deanna's feet, as always, head resting on her leg, breathing even, eyes half closed in rest, when suddenly his graying ears twitched, then perked straight up. A faint sound cut through the tapping keyboards, printer noise, and voices. A sound just enough to make him lift his head, nose raised slightly as if catching the scent of a memory unnamed. The door opened, and a young woman stepped inside. No one recognized her at first. Her gaze was deep and shadowed like still water, neither fearful nor peaceful. Dark brown hair tied low, face bare of makeup, and a worn jacket faded at the elbows. She stopped before Helen Shaw's desk, and set down a stack of papers. "I'm Elise Monroe," she said softly like a breeze, but firmly like a closing door. "I escaped him 7 years ago when I was 9, and I know how he talks." A heavy silence filled the room. Deanna froze. Helen stood up. Blitz rose from his spot, neither barking nor growling, but walked slowly toward Elise, eyes locked on her as if probing something deeper than her appearance. When he stopped, facing the young woman, small but aged beyond her years, he bowed his head gently. A weighty nod. Not a greeting, but recognition. Elise looked at Blitz and, somehow, did not recoil. Instead, she bent down and softly touched his head. "I wished back then for a dog like you. Just one bark could have stopped everything." Blitz remained still. But Deanna knew that beneath that stillness stirred a faint quake inside him, like something he'd waited his whole life for had finally been answered. Elise began to speak, not as a victim, but as a survivor, a witness holding a map to a maze no one else had escaped. She pointed to phrases in the USB folders. Option 1, low risk, deviate 0, and quietly explained, "These aren't just codes, they're a language. He spoke these when training the children he chose. We were scored, not by points, but by reactions. He had recording devices, captured how we breathed, how we responded, how we feared." Helen Shaw frowned. Deanna clenched her fists and turned away slightly, as if needing a deep breath to keep from trembling. Elise's voice was steady and tearless, but every word dropped heavy as stones piled onto buried memories. From her backpack, she unfolded a folded sheet, a copy of an encrypted code FBI had yet to decode from the folder named Pavilion Archive. Elise glanced at it less than 3 seconds, then softly said, "He made me copy this code hundreds of times. He said it was the library, the record of candidates. Whoever could keep quiet was saved. Whoever was noisy was discarded." The only sounds left were the steady hum of the air conditioner and Blitz's footsteps, now returned to Deanna's side, lying down but still turning his head toward Elise, eyes fixed, not wary, but like one listening to a story meant to be remembered forever. Thanks to Elise, the FBI decoded 4 encrypted files and uncovered the real names of 3 missing children never before linked to Langston. One of them, a Czech girl named Annika, had been marked as removed from the system in 2021. Helen Shaw looked long at Elise and spoke solemnly, almost pleadingly. "You may not wear a badge, but today you are the reason other children won't fall into that black hole." Elise said nothing. She turned to Blitz, the silent sentinel. She stepped forward, bent down, and this time gently hugged his neck as if holding on to a childhood she had never been protected from. Blitz remained still. He did not move, only stayed, letting people like Elise know that though the past cannot be changed, the present holds lives that, without words, still stand for what is right. And that is how Blitz, the dog thought retired, became the meeting place of 2 pains, one not yet happened, and one never named. Late that afternoon, after a day thick with information, memories, and layers of silent data like mine hidden in the mind, Deanna decided she needed something normal. No meetings, no codes, no codenames or files. Just a short trip to a seaside supermarket, where people still queued for vegetables, where cashiers greeted customers with repeated smiles. A little peace, however surface level, is sometimes enough to keep a person from breaking under too much weight. Blitz came along. He didn't like supermarkets. The smell of plastic, chemicals, raw meat mixed, and the constant whoosh of automatic doors opening and closing, all these made a dog who once worked crime scenes feel out of control. But he went anyway. Not by desire, but because he understood. Deanna needed him near, so her heart wouldn't quake with unspoken fears from the morning's talk with Elise. They entered. Blitz walked slowly, head lowered slightly, ears perked as if each step on the white tile floor was a search for an unfamiliar pulse in the crowded flow. Deanna reached for a milk carton, when Blitz suddenly stopped. He didn't growl or bark. He just froze, body taut like a drawn bowstring, neck stretched, eyes sharp and locked on a vague spot near the fruit aisle, where the supermarket's calm seemed to fracture. Deanna turned to look, and in that moment, time compressed into a cold slash. A little girl, about 7, pale blonde hair tied high, wearing a soft peach jacket, stood alone by the banana display, clutching a fruit as if unsure which to pick. About 4 meters away, a man in a low baseball cap, sunglasses indoors, pretended to examine vegetables, but didn't move along any aisles, his gaze never leaving the girl. Blitz growled softly, not loud, but enough to startle the man, who spun quickly, without looking at Deanna or Blitz, and fled. No glance back, no explanation. A sudden movement so jarring it shattered the supermarket's ordinary rhythm. A cookie rack toppled. A customer screamed. The girl gasped, crying out. Deanna didn't need to order. Blitz took off. With a speed no one expected from a 12-year-old dog, he dashed down aisles, crossed the frozen food section, rounded the checkout, and beat the fleeing man to the back parking lot. His footsteps echoed on the concrete, like war drums signaling a fight without guns. The man glanced back. Blitz leaped, not attacking fiercely but pinning him down with just enough force to prevent escape, not hurting, just stopping. No growl, no bite. He stood blocking the man and the supermarket exit, eyes shining bright like a flashlight on a foggy night. Deanna arrived seconds later, breathing heavy but steady, as she pulled a backup pair of handcuffs from her jacket. "Police," she said clearly. "Stay down." The man stammered. "I was just buying vegetables. I swear I didn't do anything." Deanna silently yanked off his glasses. In his dull brown eyes was no fear, only a chilling emptiness, as if numbness was the clearest confession. A quick check revealed his phone contained a covert photo of the girl in the supermarket and a map of Bayfront Elementary with notes on dismissal times. That night, Blitz didn't sleep. He lay by Deanna's feet on the couch of their temporary apartment porch. The distant sea whispered. The wind carried a salty chill and a faint gasoline scent from the harbor. Deanna gently stroked his head. "We caught another," she said softly. "But who knows how many others lurk at school dismissals, in milk lines." Blitz didn't bark. He just raised his head and looked at her, eyes cloudy with age but brightened by the one thing never old: instinct. Blitz didn't need to know the masked man's name, origin, or layers of disguise. He just sensed the smallest shift in the air when a child trembled with fear, unseen by adults. And at that moment, tired, old, once silent in retirement, he would rise, by a lesson no one taught, ears aged but never misled, and a heart that never stopped listening to what people often missed. That morning, the sky over Bayfront was as gloomy as usual, with gray clouds drifting low over the rooftops of Bayfront Elementary, muting the sunlight as if the whole town were holding its breath. But for Blitz, the light did not come from the sky. It came from silent traces buried deep beneath the earth, from the scent of unspoken things, from the unusual flow of air around a child who had not yet had time to be afraid. Deanna brought Blitz to Bayfront Elementary after the federal investigation team officially opened the file on Maya, the 6-year-old redhead with ash-gray eyes like volcanic ash. The next target marked Option 1 in the Pavilion Network folder. The school is nestled in a peaceful neighborhood. No steel fences, no armed guards, just flower beds lining the walkways, mossy benches, and walls decorated with student artwork. A place that seemed utterly free of darkness. But Blitz didn't believe in peace. The moment he stepped out of the car, he didn't greet anyone or wag his tail as a dog accustomed to hundreds of children's hands might in school safety programs. Today, he wasn't here to play. He was here to seek. Deanna held the leash gently and walked beside him toward the backyard, a less trafficked area with a low fence connecting to a dense shrubbery patch tucked between 2 buildings. Blitz lowered his head and began to scent the air. Not hurried, not distracted. He moved like a precise machine, measuring every step, every gentle sniff, every glance at the ground as if reading each grain of sand. Then, just beneath a low bush, where thick grass seemed to try to hide something hastily discarded, Blitz froze. He didn't bark. He stood perfectly still, nose nearly touching the earth, ears stretched forward. Deanna understood immediately. She knelt, brushing aside the weeds and dry roots to reveal a small white sock printed with a winged unicorn, flying across a rainbow, its purple trim stained with mud, almost entirely concealed if not for the eyes of one who searches the unseen. On the sock's trim, though faded by water, Deanna read the faint print. Property of Maya. Her hand trembled slightly. Blitz lifted his head, eyes never leaving the patch of grass ahead. Then he growled, a deep, low sound like an electric current running down a spine, but with an invisible force that made Deanna's heartbeat skip. Check playground cameras. Time, 4 or 5 days ago, Deanna said into her radio. Southwest corner. Something's wrong. Within 10 minutes, tech support responded. The footage extracted from an old security camera, with blurry resolution and a skewed angle to the right, unveiled something no one expected. A white van, license plate missing, slowly slid past the frame's edge, then stopped just outside the west fence, less than 10 meters from where the sock was found. The engine idled. No doors opened. No one exited. The van sat silent like a predator holding its breath in the dark, then quietly drove away after exactly 4 minutes and 13 seconds, leaving behind a gap unnoticed by anyone except a dog who never ignored what others deemed trivial. But Blitz didn't need that long. He had scented it the moment the van became just a shadow in the grass's lingering memory. Helen Shaw arrived later, standing by the fence and looking down at the patch where the sock lay. She gazed at Maya, the girl now sitting several feet away inside the classroom, innocently flipping through a coloring book, unaware that a slow step and a poorly lit camera angle had nearly pulled her into the silent abyss of the world. Deanna crouched beside Blitz. He now sat still, his gaze no longer on the grass, but following the hallway where Maya had just passed. "You came in time," Deanna whispered. "You came again in time." Blitz gave no response, but Deanna knew. He heard her and understood. That evening, in the FBI's temporary office, photos from the scene were pinned to the board. The sock, the van's location, the time it appeared, all pointing to one conclusion. They had approached Maya, and if Blitz hadn't sensed the lingering breath on that grass, no one, not a single soul, would have known what almost happened. Some heroes don't need to enter the battlefield. They only need to feel when the line is about to be crossed. And Blitz, he stood there, right on time, as a reminder amid the chaos that instinct, when listened to, is often the first voice of salvation. The next day, as the pieces around Maya were still being assembled like jagged shards, an urgent message came to the command team. Harborview Lutheran, a private elementary school 8 miles south of Bayfront, had reported a suspicious incident. A parent had called the administration after spotting a man in a yellow raincoat lingering too long by a side gate, an area without surveillance cameras, where children often shortcut through a narrow alley leading into the neighborhood. Deanna didn't hesitate. She got into the car. Blitz sat ready in the back seat as if already knowing the destination. Harborview lay nestled among old, damp poplars, still wet from last night's rain. The playground held puddles, and the sky was veiled by a leaden cloud layer, casting a light that seemed to hover between day and an unfinished dream. Blitz stepped out, moving without hesitation. He avoided the main entrance. Instead, he turned toward the side gate, where an old gravel alley barely wide enough for a cart stretched out. His ears pricked, his nose lifted, a faint noise, like rubber boots scraping stone, like a breath held in a wrong heartbeat, made him pause. Then he quickened his pace. At the alley's end, Hidden behind a tall fence and a public trash bin stood a figure. A dark yellow raincoat, hood pulled low, hiding most of the face, shoulders slightly raised with tension, and eyes, though obscured by sunglasses, following the wind Blitz caught, focused on the children playing in the yard. A growl rose in Blitz's chest, deep, cold, signaling only one thing. The explosion was imminent. The man turned and saw Blitz, then ran. Deanna shouted, "Stop!" But Blitz didn't wait for orders. The leash slipped from her hand like a precise cut. Blitz launched forward like a living arrow. Though old, his movements were flawless, as if time froze for each moment as he sprang over puddles, dodged obstacles, and sprinted after the panicked man weaving through residential alleys behind the school. The chase lasted just over 30 seconds, but each second stretched into a harsh string where instinct and memory fused into the drive of a dog who never allowed himself to slow before evil. The man turned into a dead-end alley. He glanced back. Blitz was already there. With a trained leap, precise, controlled, not brutal but uncompromising, he clamped his jaws onto the suspect's left arm at an angle that forced him down without permanent injury. Deanna arrived moments later, gun drawn by habit, but she didn't need it. Blitz had done enough. The man lay sprawled, raincoat torn at one side, hood fallen, revealing salt and pepper hair and a pale face. Not from pain, but from the horror of being caught, not by a man, but by a creature who sensed what he had not yet acted upon. In his pocket, a handwritten note listing 3 names, 3 schools, and 3 dismissal times. One was Maya. Again, Maya. Deanna bent down, grasped Blitz's paw, and squeezed gently. "You were right again." He gave no reply, but his eyes locked onto the suspect, not with hatred, but with certainty. Anyone stepping into the danger zone where children live and breathe would face something more than meaningless growls. A dog who never retired, never backed down, and never made a mistake. That night, local news reported the arrest of the mysterious man in the yellow raincoat. But for Deanna, the truth wasn't in the interviews. She sat beside Blitz on the steps of their temporary home, the streetlight casting a glow on his dark fur streaked with gray. The salty sea breeze whispered in her ear with an unspoken question. How many children had been watched silently without anyone knowing? How many times had the first bark never been heard? She bowed her head and touched Blitz's forehead. "At least this time, you came in time." He didn't need to answer. His calm eyes said it all. When the interrogation room door slammed shut with a heavy thud, like an unspoken accusation that needed no paper, the overhead light shone down sharply on the cold metal table, casting harsh shadows over the pale, vacant face of the man Blitz had just restrained in the alley behind Harborview School. The man, once cloaked in a yellow raincoat, now stood exposed, stripped of all pretenses, no longer feigning calm, no longer hiding eyes lurking in the shadows, only a thin layer of sweaty skin and stammered words that could not steady his racing heart. His name was Calvin Royce Miller, 52 years old, a drifter who had wandered through dozens of western towns before vanishing from all records over a year ago. His criminal record showed petty offenses: theft, trespassing, and possession of controlled substances, all minor, scattered, and largely ignored. But today, in front of federal agents, Calvin was no longer a petty nuisance. He was Rook, a disposable pawn in the criminal chess game orchestrated by Thomas Langston, who placed each piece deliberately. Deanna stood behind the one-way glass, her shoulders tense, eyes locked on the man trembling as if each question was an electric shock through his spine. Beside her, Blitz lay still like a statue, ears flattened back, tail unmoving. But his eyes, those eyes never left Calvin since the moment he stepped into the room. Blitz needed no words. He observed through an ancient language, where instinct and memory merged into something almost sacred. And in Calvin's ragged breaths, in the way he glanced furtively at the camera and then quickly dropped his eyes to the floor, Blitz knew. He was hiding something. Agent Monroe was the interrogator. She spoke little. She only slid a thin file across to him. Inside were 3 photos: Maya at the schoolyard, the unicorn sock, and the photo of Calvin pinned down by Blitz. "Real name?" she asked, her voice as steady as the sterile air in an operating room. "Calvin Royce Miller," he replied, so quietly she had to lean in to hear. "Online, alias? Rook?" He nodded. "I just observe," Calvin said, avoiding Monroe's gaze like a man sitting before a mirror, unwilling to face himself. "Langston coordinates. I don't touch anyone." "You observe," Monroe repeated, flipping to the first page of GPS routing data from his phone. "Like when you stood near Harborview's fence 3 times in 2 weeks, right after school?" "I was told to check reactions. Just take notes," he mumbled. "Notes on what?" "He has a grade sheet. Which kids walk alone, don't resist, which behave." Behind the glass, Deanna clenched her fists. Blitz remained motionless, but beneath his dark fur, his back rose and fell ever so slightly, as if the tense air from the past was creeping back. "How long have you known Langston?" Monroe pressed. "Almost 2 years, on forums. He used the alias Archivist. I didn't know his real name at first." "And who else is in the network?" "I don't know. He never said. All contacts through burner phones. I only got pictures, maps, and surveillance times." Monroe flipped to another page. The last message from Langston before his capture. "Do not engage Carter Girl again. Too noisy. You know who Carter Girl is?" He nodded, lips tight. "Lucy," he whispered. "The girl with pink shoes. He said to skip her because she reacted too fast. He didn't want trouble. And if Blitz hadn't been there?" He was silent and lowered his head, but that silence was an answer that chilled the room even more. When Calvin left the interrogation room, he was escorted away in silence. But Blitz, he didn't take his eyes off him. As Calvin crossed the door to the hallway, Blitz's gaze followed. Not as a guard, but as one who remembers every move, because he knew in the trail left by a man like this, hundreds more lurked in the shadows. Deanna bent down, gently stroking Blitz's head. "You saw what we didn't," she whispered, "and this time, we listened." Blitz closed his eyes, but not in peace. Just a brief pause before diving again into a vortex, where truth came not from courts, but from the instincts of a creature who never missed a faltering breath in a seemingly peaceful world. After the interrogation that shattered Calvin Royce Miller's fragile layers of disguise, the FBI investigation team didn't rest for a second. The data gathered from electronic devices, burner phones, old memory cards, and finally a USB found in a secret compartment of Langston's suitcase, quickly became the focus of a large-scale analysis no one in the room wanted to face. Because no one was ready to confront the existence of a world coldly organized, where children were no longer carefree beings, but numbers, targets, and worst of all, choices. The second USB took longer to decrypt than expected. Technicians had to run through 4 layers of encryption, each hiding code camouflaged as fake audio files, family photo libraries, and a legal document emulator, as if its designer wanted to challenge the entire legal system's intelligence. But after nearly 12 hours without leaving their desks, a young specialist named Rowan, eyes red from sleep deprivation and voice barely a whisper, opened a door no one wanted to enter. The screen displayed not chats, blurred images, or location data, but a chillingly simple spreadsheet. Children's names, schools, ages, genders, eye colors, identifying features, and the last column, behavior score. No pretense here. No reason to deny it. They, the Pavilion Network, had built a human classification system where each child was scored like a product on a shelf, assessed by their reaction level to contact, ability to scream for help, and especially social attachment. Like they were searching for children lonely enough to be unnoticed, but not so strange as to arouse suspicion. A twisted paradox shaking every ethical foundation. And then, among strange names and cold, indifferent numbers, Deanna saw a familiar one. Lucy Carter. ID code 0763-BF, Meadow Creek School. Age 7. Eyes, light brown. Hair, dark brown. Reaction index, 5 out of 5. Echo response, 5 out of 5. Social attachment, 4 out of 5. The last note, italicized in red. Too noisy. Screamed immediately. Refused compliance. Scared subject. Recommend exclusion. A heavy silence fell over the room. No one spoke. And then, in a heart choking on its beat, in the void between cold words and the reality hitting straight to the soul, Deanna could only turn to Blitz. The dog lying still near the door, eyes fixed on the screen as if he had known this all along, as if his instinct had sensed the choice between life and disappearance that the entire human world failed to recognize. Blitz didn't need to understand the codes or algorithms. But that day, he growled at a stranger, tensed to stop a hand from touching Lucy's shoulder, and barked just once, enough to shatter a plan months in the making. One bark exchanged for a life. Deanna stood silently before the screen for a long time. In the flickering light of the ceiling lamp and the rapid tapping of keyboards from specialists, another set of data opened. This time a list of other children. Maya Sanderson, Lily Foster, and 8 more names never reported missing. All had low reaction scores, no echo response, and no social attachment. They were safe targets. Quiet children, manageable children, and Lucy, because of her noise, survived. Deanna suddenly realized the cruelest thing was not the crime itself, but its cold thoroughness, when a group of people chose children based on behavior like selecting items labeled fragile, replaceable. Blitz slowly stood, stepping toward the investigation board with printed photos of children temporarily pinned. He paused before Maya's photo, nose gently touching the frame as if marking it. Then he looked at Lucy, the photo of the girl with braided hair and faded pink shoes after weeks of investigation. He stood between the 2 frames, motionless, and in his quiet gaze, Deanna understood one thing. Blitz didn't need to know who was right or wrong, only which child was at risk of being forgotten, and he would never take his eyes off them, because that was the one thing he chose not with reason, but with loyalty, until his last breath. The data kept pouring down like an unending rain, line after line from the slowly decrypted USB, revealing truths no one wanted to see. And among the lists of nameless children, among the cold identification codes etched like scars on existence records, the name Lily Foster quietly stood out. The child who had vanished from her Denver neighborhood 6 weeks earlier, her pink hat found in Langston's suitcase, lying next to a bottle of sedatives and a coil of nylon ties, the only remaining evidence of her presence. Blitz sat quietly beside the work desk, his head resting on his front paws, eyes half open. He didn't look at the screen, but everyone could see his posture wasn't for rest. It was to listen, because, perhaps in his heart, the name Lily was not just a file. It was something that should never have happened. Then, when no one expected anything but the cold routine of another afternoon, the interrogation room door creaked open. No noise, no announcement, just a soft hinge sound, enough to make everyone turn. A woman appeared. She wore no sunglasses, no hood. Her face was bare, full but pale, as if the sun had lost its power to color her skin after more than a month of living with loss. The coat she wore was thick, made for those who stand long in the cold wind. Not because of the weather, but from the habit of those who have stood outside police stations every day, waiting for a call. In her hands, a faded wool scarf was twisted tight. Not to keep warm, but to hold herself together in a world emptied since her daughter disappeared. She was Lily's mother. No introduction is needed. Lily's photo, pinned in the center of the investigation board, said it all. Her eyes lingered there only a few seconds before moving and pausing when she met Blitz's gaze. The canine dog did not move forward. He did not bark, did not greet, did not wag his tail like when meeting children at the schoolyard. He just sat there, eyes half aware and contemplative, silently watching as if he recognized the pain in the woman's breath before she spoke. She stepped closer. Each footstep seemed to cross a fragile memory, about to shatter. Then she knelt, unbothered by the cold floor, needing no comfort. Placing her hand on Blitz's fur streaked with gray, she did not cry, only whispered in a hoarse voice, "Thank you if that day my daughter had someone like you by her side, maybe." The unfinished sentence fell like the last leaf of the season, searching for earth. Then she rested her head on Blitz's shoulder, the scarf slipping from her hand and touching the floor without a sound. Blitz didn't flinch. He didn't tilt his head in response either, but in every breath he held, every second he let the mother's pain soak into his coat, it was his way of nodding, not with movement, but with permission. Deanna stood behind, hands softly clenched. She didn't intervene, nor did she ask anyone to leave. This was no longer official business. This was a final contact between broken pieces, a mother and a dog, together having lost a child no one should have lost. The woman said no more. When she stood, she placed a thin envelope on the table, then turned to Deanna, then Blitz. "There are Lily's drawings inside," she said, voice thin as smoke. She was a terrible artist, but the last time she smiled was while drawing it. Deanna opened the envelope after the woman left. Inside was a childlike scrawl of a small house, a wide-open window, and a dog standing in front. Species unknown, but with large ears and very round eyes. Above the picture, in childish, slanted letters, it read, "The dog watches the house." Like a superhero, but without a cape. Blitz tilted his head slightly and moved closer to the table. He pressed his nose to the paper's edge, sniffing very softly. Deanna fell silent because she knew from now on no one needed to say anything to him. Blitz had heard, and Blitz would remember. For some dogs don't guard houses, but watch over children, whether in the past or those forgotten names. In the cold, white-lit room of the Federal Investigation Center, just after the second USB was decrypted and Lily's mother's footsteps still lingered in the hallway, the space suddenly seemed to slow down. No calls, no voices, only the faint hum of the air purifier and the sporadic tapping of keyboards. Everyone present understood that something deeper than data was happening, something not on any document, nor captured by any camera, something that only happened within people's hearts, and in the heart of a dog. Deanna didn't immediately leave her spot. She still sat beside Blitz, near the main investigation desk where Lily Foster's photo rested among other files, like a light not saved on a dark map they were trying to redraw with logic. Her hand still felt the dark fur streaked with gray she had just leaned on, when tears suddenly fell without warning. "Do you remember, Blitz?" she began, whispering low enough for only him to hear, but clear enough to keep herself from falling into silence. "The first time we lost a child." Blitz didn't move, but his head tilted slightly toward her. A subtle gesture only those who have worked with canines understand, not a reflex, but deep attention, listening with his whole body. "Evelyn," she said the name aloud for the first time in years. 8 years old, blue eyes, curly hair, the first child you growled at, and you told me to be quiet. Her voice didn't tremble, but each word seemed to peel back layers of dusty memories. Back then, she had been only 3 years in the force. Blitz was fresh out of training. Both are young, still full of faith in protocol, in valid ID cards, in trusting a friendly face. "He showed his ID card, do you remember?" Deanna continued, eyes staring into the space as if looking back at her past self. "He said he was her uncle. The way he placed his hand on Evelyn's head, not fast, not rushed, but just enough to feel familiar. And you growled the moment he stepped onto school grounds." She squeezed her hands lightly, took a deep breath, then looked at Blitz. "I told you to calm down. I pulled the leash, and you bowed your head, not because you trusted, but because you obeyed." Blitz remained still, but his ears twitched. 3 days later, she went on, They found Evelyn's backpack by the river. No trace, no camera, and I didn't sleep a full night for 6 months. By then, Deanna leaned over, hugging Blitz with both arms. Not a trainer's hold, but one of a person admitting fault to the only being who had forgiven without demand. You sat outside the station all night that night, remember? Eyes never leaving the main gate. Your back as stiff as stone. Everyone said you didn't eat. I knew. Because you never forgave yourself. Her voice softened, neither breaking into tears nor cracking into sobs, but flowing quietly like an underground stream, silent but unstoppable. And then you stopped growling. For a whole year after that. Even when I saw suspicious people, you just stood still. You waited for orders. You stopped trusting yourself. A long silence. Then she said with certainty, "But today you didn't wait." She lifted her head, eyes wet but shining with something steady, like a flame not extinguished but quietly burning beneath the ashes. Today you stepped forward. No need to check ID. No need to verify. No need for anyone's approval. Just one child who didn't recognize the man claiming to be her grandfather. And you knew. Blitz stretched, his nose gently touching her hand. A silent agreement. No pride, no demand. Just confirmation. He had done the right thing. This time, he wouldn't let anyone disappear. At the other corner of the room, a server paused on an unopened file. A simple interface. Just the text. SFX. _library _track28.wav. A technician hesitated, looking at Deanna, waiting for a signal. She nodded. Slow. Certain. The sound played, at first just wind and footsteps of a child on sand. Then a gentle male voice, slow and kind, echoed in the chilling silence. You know you are the most precious gift. But this is our secret, okay? Blitz sprang up in an instant no one quite caught. He didn't bark or growl, just stood firm, 4 paws rooted to the floor as if grounded in reality. Eyes fixed on the screen playing the recording, as if hearing not with ears, but with the memory of a soul that never forgets. Some things need not be seen, only felt. The scent of lies, the sound of darkness. And when all reason hesitated, he stepped forward. Not by command, but by a promise etched deep in his heart, to protect, no matter the unnamed dangers. Deanna looked at Blitz. No more tears, no more fear. Only one thing left. If anyone else is out there waiting for us, we won't let them wait alone. And Blitz, as always through the years, needed nothing but one step forward. The white light from the courtroom ceiling shone down on the orderly rows of wooden benches, where every even breath echoed silently, compressed by the heavy air of judgment. The case of Langston and the federal suspects in the Pavilion Network was officially brought to public trial, not only for possession of tools potentially used for kidnapping, but also due to an invisible urgency. The community needed reassurance, the victims needed a voice, and children like Lily needed acknowledgement, even if it came from the silence of someone who never confessed. Deanna arrived early. Her neat navy blue suit made her look like an officer attending a funeral, and for her, this was indeed a kind of mourning. Nobody, no eulogy, but a funeral for the fragile trust in safety society had believed in for too long. A valid license plate, a current ID, and a polite smile were enough to convince an entire school. Blitz was not allowed inside, but lay quietly outside in the hallway, close to the window where Deanna's eyes could meet his any time. He demanded nothing, only observed, lying as steady as in any mission before. The defense attorney rose, adjusted his glasses, and his polished voice, shaped by dozens of big wins, echoed with perfect restraint. Your Honor, my client, Mr. Thomas Langston, is accused based on sentiment, not concrete actions. Yes, there was a suitcase. Yes, drugs. Yes, zip ties, and a pink hat belonging to a missing little girl. But no one was touched. No child was taken. No specific act constituting kidnapping. He paused, eyes scanning the reporters, taking notes at every word. And the greatest evidence the prosecution offers? The reaction of a dog. A dog, I might add. Retired. Whispers rippled like waves. Some heads tilted toward Deanna. She did not blink. "We may love animals," the lawyer continued. "We may respect the contributions of service dogs. But the law cannot be operated on the reflexes of an animal, no matter how well-intentioned." He stepped toward the jury, lowering his voice. "If one could be convicted by a bark, Your Honor, how many would be tried for things they never did? This is a court of evidence, not instinct." He nodded lightly and returned to his seat. Deanna stood after the prosecutor's call. She carried no documents, no images. No polished speeches were written by legal assistants. She had only one truth. "Your Honor," Deanna began, her voice neither loud nor harsh, but something pulled every gaze to her like a magnet in a barren desert. "I once believed in IDs, believed invalid papers, believed in a smiling eye and a neat jacket, and that faith caused a child never to come back." She looked straight at Langston. He returned her gaze, expressionless. Blitz growled that day. He knew. No one trains him to bark at good people. No one teaches him to tell real from fake by paperwork. But he senses, by a way humans have forgotten, by instinct, by vigilance, by something deeper than words. Some jurors nodded gently. An elderly man wiped his glasses. He barked once, only once, then pulled me toward that man, not by command but by duty. And inside his suitcase was Lily Foster's hat, the little girl missing for 6 weeks. She paused, turning to the glass where Blitz lay, eyes half closed but ears still tuned to the courtroom. "He doesn't know the law, but he knows right from wrong. And this time I listened. This time we didn't let another disappear." A moment of silence. And then she said, "You may not trust dogs, but I do, because I once lost a child for not listening. And this time, thanks to Blitz, we saved a life. The law may not call that evidence, but conscience does." The judge remained silent for a long time. In the afternoon, sunlight streaming through the windows, rays reflected on the tense faces. He tapped his wooden gavel softly. "The court will recess for 45 minutes. Deanna left the stand and stepped into the hallway. Blitz stood before she opened the door. He wagged his tail slightly. Not much, but enough to make her smile. "You already spoke," she whispered, hand resting on Blitz's head. "Now we just have to wait for them to hear." Blitz didn't answer. He simply walked beside her, pacing steadily, eyes fixed on the courtroom door, as if knowing truth doesn't need to outshout words, only enough patience to endure. Like the final bell at Meadow Creek School, a small sound carrying great weight. The trial ended not with a verdict, but with silence heavy with hope. Deanna walked slowly through the marble corridors of the courthouse, Blitz pacing evenly beside her, head slightly bowed, as if understanding that today people didn't need an attack dog, but a soul willing to listen. As they passed through the main doors, the late afternoon light cast a golden hue over Blitz's graying coat, not the sparkle of glory, but the color of experience. He didn't look back at the crowd behind, nor stop for the cameras. Everything Blitz needed was to walk with Deanna. But far away, well beyond Carter County, Blitz's instinct had just led to what the legal system alone could not yet accomplish. In a forested town in southern Ohio, an FBI task force stopped before an old cabin hidden among dark maple trees. Nothing special about its exterior. Weathered gray wood, windows covered in newspaper, a broken antenna silent on the tin roof. But all normalcy shattered when they matched data extracted from the USB. The one Blitz had sniffed right, touched instinctively while people debated in interrogations. Coordinates from the file pending E7, the place of a girl coded option blue, risk, minimal, and the name, once decrypted, Naomi Thorne, 8 years old, missing from a gas station in Missouri a year and a half ago. Inside, the house resembled an old storage shed, with layers of doors, locks, and eerie silence. Children's items left hanging. A dirty plastic Hello Kitty cup, a fairy tale book with smudged fingerprints on the middle pages, and a headless Barbie doll lying face down against the wall. Then, in the third corner of the room, between two cardboard boxes and a thin blanket, Naomi sat curled up, eyes wide but unresponsive, as if she had learned every move might draw attention. No screams, no sobs, just stillness, the kind of silence that made the task force feel like they opened a door to an unhealed memory. Agent Helen Shaw was the first to approach. She didn't stoop or speak loudly, just sat low, hands on her knees, voice soft as a breath. "Naomi, we're here to take you home." The girl didn't reply, but what surprised the team was when she looked up, lips trembling slightly, then whispered, afraid someone beyond the forest might hear. "I heard a dog bark. Yesterday. One bark. A long time since I heard one." Shaw stopped. "You heard it? Where?" Naomi placed her small hand over her chest, right in the middle, and whispered, "Inside here, like the bark I used to hear at home." Simple but haunting words made the agents behind freeze. A child, trapped in solitude for so long, still holding on to a bark as a form of safe memory. And that bark was Blitz's. Not nearby, not echoing through walls, but arriving in a way no one could explain, through trust. That night in Carter County, Deanna sat with Blitz on the back porch where they often drank tea when cases allowed a short break. She received a message from Shaw. "The girl is alive. Naomi Thorne. She is intact." She folded her phone and looked down at Blitz lying by her feet. He didn't look at her, only gazed toward the distant trees where the wind stirred shadows no flashlight or data could measure. "You didn't need to be there," she whispered, hand resting on his back. "But your voice got through." Blitz didn't move, but his breathing slowed, deepened, as if finally, after days of guarding and unconscious vigilance, he allowed himself a long breath. Beneath the years of graying fur beat a heart that never let itself sleep peacefully. The next morning, the task force searching the cabin found a small note tucked under a mattress, scribbled, childish but clear. "If anyone finds this note, please give it to the dog who barked for me. I don't know where you are, but I remember that sound. Thank you." They sent a copy of the letter to Deanna, along with a handwritten note from Shaw. "This is not evidence, but it is part of justice we never imagined." Deanna printed the letter and placed it beside Blitz's dinner bowl. He looked up, not understanding the words, but the scent of paper, ink, and the fear once soaked in it made him stand slowly, circle around her once, and gently rest his head on her back. No growl is needed. No bark. Just presence. Because sometimes, the only thing a child needs to survive is the quiet presence of someone sensitive enough to listen, even when no words are spoken, only by instinct. After Naomi was rescued when the fiercest storms had faded from the front pages, people began referring to Blitz with two simple yet weighty words: hero. But if anyone asked Deanna whether he understood that, she would smile and shake her head. For Blitz, the concept of glory never lived in his inner dictionary. He lived by only one principle: being there when someone needed him. And this time, someone was not a victim in the pavilion list, not a monitored target, not in any file. It was a 3-year-old boy in a peaceful kindergarten class in suburban Carter County. Willow Bloom Preschool is nestled beneath a stand of old willows. The windows were always slightly open to let in the scent of chalk and quiet giggles drifting through the hallways. But at the far end of the hall was a small classroom where the teacher often reminded students to speak softly and move gently, for a boy named Eli, who had not spoken a single word in a year. He arrived on time, sat in his seat, ate his portion, but never called anyone's name, never smiled. At loud noises he would curl up, clutch his head, and avoid all movement. No doctor could give a precise diagnosis, only that he had suffered severe trauma at just over 2 years old. Since then, his world had closed off like a room without a key. One cool Friday morning, Deanna was invited to the school with Blitz as part of Meet the Heroes Day. where little students got to meet firefighters, nurses, and this time, a dog who had protected a little girl by instinct. Blitz entered the classroom with the calm demeanor of a wise elder. No enthusiastic tail wagging, no eager stretching like other dogs. He moved slowly, eyes scanning the room as if ensuring no danger was present, then gently sat beside Deanna. Children are naturally sensitive to genuine emotions. Even the shyest crept closer, smiling softly, reaching out to stroke Blitz's salt and pepper fur. He remained still, only tilting his head, when a little girl placed a star-shaped sticker on his forehead. But Eli did not. He sat curled in the back near the bookshelf, eyes locked on Blitz without blinking. His hand clutched his shirt hem, his whole body tensed as if ready to flee. The teacher prepared to intervene, but Deanna signaled her to stop. Blitz had seen Eli, too. Without calling or advancing, he stood and walked toward the boy, each step so slow it measured the breath between. At about 2 meters away, Blitz stopped, sat motionless, and did not come closer. The silence lasted over a minute. Then suddenly something strange happened. Eli loosened his grip on his shirt. His fingers trembled. Then he placed his hand on the floor, inching closer to Blitz. Without instruction, without pressure, only something in his eyes had shifted. A first flicker of trust returning. And when Eli touched Blitz's warm fur, he leaned down softly, whispering something no one heard. The teacher couldn't believe her ears. She stepped closer, quietly bent down, and asked, "Eli, what did you just say?" He didn't look at her, only kept stroking Blitz, then repeated, this time clearly, "The dog's not scared, so I don't have to be scared anymore." The teacher cried, not from surprise, but because it had been so long since anyone believed the boy would speak. Blitz didn't react. He remained seated, as if understanding, but needing no confirmation. And everyone who witnessed that day knew. Some heroes don't need praise, no badges or trophies. Some heroes never retire, because the world still holds children who haven't dared to speak, and only when true ears listen can they find themselves again. Eli's small words echoed in Deanna's heart for the entire following week. It was not just the start of a child, but a reminder that what Blitz was doing went beyond training, beyond even the boundary of retired K9. Then, like a crack opening in a wall of silence stretched for years, a message from Agent Helen Shaw changed everything. "We found another photo. No name in U.S. databases." The email attachment was a photo, blurred but chilling enough to send shivers. A girl around 8 years old, tangled curly hair, eyes straight and impossibly deep for her age. She did not smile, did not hesitate, just looked directly into the lens, as if knowing someone would look again, no matter how many years passed. Below the photo was a single caption, encoded in the Pavilion User 76 folder. "Annika, age 8. Status, acquired. Prague 2021. Shaw said, "We found no missing person records with that name, no birth certificate, no registry, no medical report. No one ever reported her missing. She was like she never existed." Deanna printed the photo and placed it on her desk. Blitz lay in the corner, resting after a day at the police station, where he still came weekly as part of a trauma support program for children and victims. She looked at him for a moment, then gently called, "Blitz, come here." He didn't bark or wag his tail, but he walked over calmly, slowly, as if something in Deanna's voice signaled this was no play call. She set the photo on the floor and turned to him. "What do you see?" Blitz stared at the photo. Then his ears pricked up, his head tilted slightly. Not a strong reaction, but not indifferent. He stepped closer, nose toward the photo's corner, where a small shadow lay behind the girl's hair. Blitz paused. His breath changed. A soft, short intake. And he sat upright, eyes locked on the image as if recognizing something there not to be ignored. Deanna leaned down, eyes wide. "Do you remember a scent?" Blitz didn't answer, but the way he didn't look away said more than any words. That very night, Deanna contacted Shaw. The photo was sent to Interpol's Prague office. 3 days later, the international agency's reply made everyone sigh, not because of clear answers, but because it confirmed what everyone feared. No one named Annika has been born in the Czech Republic in the past 20 years, but there was an incident in 2021. A girl escaped from an orphanage on Prague's outskirts. No real name. No one came to claim her. No one searched, only recorded as left during a rainy night. The case was closed due to lack of trace. Nothing more, except a lonely note in the nurse's overnight log. Girl with curly hair, dark brown eyes, named herself Annika. Shaw stopped reading, voice lowering. We don't know if the girl is alive, but the photo's existence proves Pavilion operates beyond the U.S., and Blitz somehow unlocked a case no one ever named. That night, Deanna couldn't sleep. She sat on the porch, Blitz resting his head on her lap. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying the scent of changing seasons, like the feeling when you know a door is about to open, though you haven't seen the light inside. She stroked Blitz's head, eyes looking into the distant darkness. There are children never called by their true names, but you still recognize them. In your way. Blitz closed his eyes. Not from tiredness, but because he knew once again he was right. A child who seemed not to exist. A dog who never stopped listening. And a chance to bring a forgotten soul home. After weeks of following fragmented data, each old photo, every blurred note, each code once marked as insufficient for verification, the international investigation team finally found a fragile link leading them to the suburbs of Prague, where everything looked suspiciously ordinary. Not an underground base, not an armed gang's hideout, but a juvenile care center, a temporary holding facility, nestled between 2 rows of old townhouses, behind a small church with a rusty bell tower. Interpol collaborated with the Czech Child Protection Agency to conduct an administrative inspection under the guise of a routine care conditions review. But upon entering the room at the end of the second-floor corridor, the only window covered with white paper to prevent outside view, they stopped. The girl was there. Small, thin, tangled curly hair, pale skin, eyes wide and still like deep waters never touched by anyone. No documents, no one knew where she came from. In the inpatient register, she was recorded as Jane Doe number 7, simply because she had spoken her unclear name on the first day she was brought there. But there was one detail that tightened every heart in the room. In her hands, clutched tightly like a treasure, was a worn postcard, corners slightly curled from being held too long. On the postcard was a hand-drawn picture of a dog, with large upright ears, deep brown eyes, and a muzzle gray as ash. Below was a line written in English, childlike handwriting but carefully formed as if someone had spent an entire afternoon perfecting it. You were never forgotten. No one understood how that postcard had reached the girl. No one at the center recalled distributing it. No mail came from America. But the FBI agents knew. The drawing was a copy of the painting Lucy had once given Blitz, reprinted for a global child trafficking awareness campaign, sent in psychological care packages across borders by Deanna's team. Children who had been victims, or nearly so, had sent messages to others still in the dark. And someone, somewhere, had reproduced that image and passed it on to the girl in the Prague center. "What's your name?" a social worker asked, gently bending down beside her. The girl did not answer immediately, but her eyes slowly left the postcard and met the worker's, then whispered firmly, voice trembling but clear, "Annika." No one cried then. They only stayed silent, because no one wanted to break the moment when a child, thought erased from the world, reclaimed her right to exist with her voice. The message sent to Deanna contained only one sentence: "Found her," along with a photo of a very small but real smile from Annika, with Blitz on the postcard still in her hand. Deanna said nothing. She just turned to Blitz, lying quietly on the porch, ears twitching softly to the rustling leaves. She sat down beside him, once again whispering, not as a command, but as a sharing. We can't be everywhere, but somehow your heart can. Blitz didn't reply. He just nudged his head into her palm. A gentle touch, simple, yet enough for her to understand that sometimes presence needs no words. Annika had been found. The news spread quietly, without the sensational headlines that once showed Blitz receiving his Medal of Honor. But for Deanna, the investigation team, and Lucy, that was a long-held sigh finally released, light as a thin smoke dissolving into peace. That morning, Carter County's sky was unusually blue. Meadow Creek School opened, as usual, its gates decorated with small blue ribbons, the symbol of safety and courage. In classroom 4B, the site of the first crack in a nationwide conspiracy, a small girl with dark brown hair stood before the board, clutching a folded piece of paper. Lucy Carter, for the first time since the incident, decided to speak. Blitz lay at the foot of the podium, with no medal and no K9 vest like at the honors ceremony. He was simply himself, with fur slightly weathered, large ears alert, and eyes watching every breath of the girl he first protected by instinct, not command. Lucy turned to her classmates, faces both familiar and changed, having endured a winter no longer innocent. She opened the paper but didn't look at it. She lifted her head, voice soft but steady. If someone tells you to be silent, you don't have to obey. If someone makes you scared, even if they smile, you can scream. You're not bad. You're surviving. The classroom fell silent, as if holding its breath. Lucy glanced at Blitz, then continued. There are people like Blitz. They don't need to speak, but they know how to listen. They believe in you, even when you haven't yet believed in yourself. Blitz didn't move, but he gently nudged her pant leg, a small touch like saying, I'm here. Hands raised, then more. Questions are not about danger, but feelings. One boy asked, If I'm scared and cry loudly, is that embarrassing? Lucy answered, No. Crying loudly is how you scream for adults to hear. The teacher stood quietly in the corner, wiping her eyes, not from sorrow, but because she understood. Today, a child had taught the whole class what years of teaching hadn't fully expressed. That recess, while classmates rushed outside, Lucy stayed, sitting beside Blitz, her hand threading through his warm fur at the nape. She said nothing, only pulled from her backpack a purple sheet, a new version of the old drawing. Still Blitz, still the red cape like a superhero, but this time behind him was a row of schools, smiling children, and a new phrase, not, he hears what we can't, but, he stays even when no one asks him to. Blitz couldn't read words, but when Lucy placed the drawing in her backpack, he turned and lightly licked her hand, the only movement he made all morning. Because Blitz knew, sometimes children need a friend who never leaves. And because, as Lucy told the class, surviving is not a weakness. Surviving is proof that the heart still beats despite being broken. After an emotional morning in Lucy's classroom, where the simple words of a child and the quiet gaze of a dog taught a whole young generation that listening to instinct is the first way to survive, a special announcement came to Carter County. The United States Congress would hold a special ceremony honoring the interagency forces that successfully thwarted an international human trafficking ring. And among the long list of names, there was one without rank, without title, without official recognition, only loyal eyes and an infallible instinct. Blitz. The Capitol building shone that day not only because of the live TV cameras, but because in the front row sat a German shepherd, sitting solemnly among FBI, Interpol, local police, and lawmakers, completely silent, yet commanding a presence no one could ignore. Deanna stepped to the podium in a simple dark suit, wearing on her lapel a small badge shaped like a paw print, gifted by Lucy's classmates. She scanned the room, then paused at Blitz, sitting quietly by the stage, eyes lifted, calm as always. Her voice was low and steady, but held something almost choked. Today, I'm not here to recount arrests. I'm not standing here to list raids or the number of dismantled cells. I am here to speak about faith, the kind of faith not found on paper, not measured by law, and not waiting for proof before acting. She paused, locking eyes with Blitz. Blitz doesn't need orders. He didn't ask me if he should growl. He didn't wait for me to say, attack. He only heard what humans sometimes are too busy to feel. Abnormality, wrongness, danger. A few nodded in the audience. But Deanna didn't look at them. She kept her gaze on her four-legged friend, the teammate who had stood silently for years. When Blitz stepped up from that school threshold that day, no one knew what would follow. But that simple, instinctive, unsolicited action opened an international investigation, finding children once forgotten, once lost in dusty files, once deemed unsearchable. She inhaled deeply. Silence enveloped the room. Then she smiled softly, voice warm and slow. If there is one thing I learned from Blitz, it's this. Courage doesn't need applause. Courage just needs presence, at the right time, the right place, and never leaving. Applause erupted, but Blitz didn't react. He turned his head towards Lucy, sitting beside Emma in the guest row, clutching a plush toy shaped like Blitz, gifted by police at the previous ceremony. She didn't stand or cheer. She only whispered to her mother, I know. We don't have to shout to be heroes. We just have to know when to stand. That day, after the ceremony, a new portrait was hung in the Capitol's third-floor Hall of Honor for contributions beyond war. It was a charcoal drawing, Blitz standing in the sunlight streaming through a window, behind him the blurred image of children running and laughing. Below is one line. He doesn't need a reason. He only needs a hunch and a child who needs protecting. That afternoon, there was no award ceremony, no cameras, and no signs saying, "Here rests a legend." Only Deanna's backyard, peaceful and green as always, and the old oak tree Blitz always chose to rest his head under as seasons changed. Leaves scattered on the ground, a gentle breeze stirred branches, and occasionally sparrows chirped as if sharing a story overheard from afar. Blitz lay quietly beneath the tree, head resting on his front paws, eyes half closed. No one told him to rest, but his body knew. No one said, "Mission complete," but his heart probably did. In a dog's life, not every run chases shadows or bad guys. Sometimes it's just to watch over children needing keen eyes and an instinct that never betrays. Lucy had stopped by that morning before school. She placed a bowl of food by the bedroom window, a habit carried on through the weeks since the incident. Not in the kitchen, not on the floor, but right by the window, where she once whispered to her mother, "Just in case Blitz wants to watch from the moon." No one dared ask why the moon, but for Lucy, it was as natural as Blitz barking when no one else dared to suspect. Deanna stepped out, holding a cold cup of tea. She wore no uniform, no badge. Today she was just a friend beside another friend, at a moment when neither needed to guard anything. She sat down beside Blitz, gently stroking his thick, darkening fur. "You know, since Lucy spoke to her class, many schools have invited us, but this time, I'll go alone." Blitz didn't open his eyes, only breathed evenly, but his ears twitched softly every time the wind chimes on the porch clinked. "Because I think maybe it's time you're allowed to rest, not because you're old, but because you've gone farther than anyone expected, far enough to reach children no one even names." Deanna leaned down, resting her forehead on Blitz's head. She didn't cry. No one did, because among those who truly understand each other, goodbyes don't need tears, just a recognition that we've walked together through the best part of what's right. That night, Lucy woke in the dark, not from a nightmare, but from a strange wind. She rose and went to the window, where the food bowl remained untouched as always. She sat down, resting her chin on her knees, whispering, "I know, Blitz. I didn't see you under the oak today, but you're still here, right? Just a little higher up." Then she smiled. Not sad, not nostalgic. gentle, like the smile of one who understands true love isn't about who stands beside you, but about feeling each other, with something deeper than words. Somewhere else, in another city, a child lost in the schoolyard at night was about to follow a stranger who smiled and called her. But suddenly, she faltered. She didn't know why, only that something tightened her heart, choked her throat, and froze her feet like hitting an invisible warning. She turned and ran. Behind her, the stranger hissed into the darkness. No one knows why she changed her mind. But if anyone was close, they might have heard, very faintly, the growl not from a mouth, but from memory, from the ancient instinct of a species that has guarded humanity since living in wild forests. A dog had stopped barking, but his instinct lives on through the children who have been heard. And somewhere, under a full, bright moon, Blitz may be standing watch, not for duty, but for something far more important, love that needs no training. Blitz's story ends here, but his paw prints remain in the soft earth of the hearts he once protected. Maybe Blitz never knew he changed the world. He only did what a loyal dog always knows to do: listen when others ignore, stand when no one dares, and love without expecting a return. From a lone growl on a school threshold, Blitz opened a global investigation, saving forgotten children, and left footprints never to fade in the hearts of those he guarded. What about you? Have you ever witnessed a moment when a dog, or an animal seemingly ordinary, did something extraordinary, only by the instinct of love? Share your story in the comments below. Perhaps it will inspire someone. If you are touched by Blitz's journey, don't forget to like, share this video with your loved ones, and subscribe to our channel to spread kindness, because true heroes sometimes walk on 4 legs. Thank you for watching. And remember, courage doesn't always need applause. Sometimes it just needs presence at the right moment.